Any volunteers for trying to define what engagement is?
What is digital engagement in the sense that before the internet came along, what were we doing? What did engagement look like then? Was there a thing called engagement? Well, yeah, of course there was, right? And it was the experience. Say, look at it in a kind of a sales perspective. It was the entire experience from walking in the shop, being dealt with by the shopkeeper or the assistant, through to the kind of the sensory experience of picking up the object or whatever, considering the purchase, and then walking away having purchased, right? And that is, I guess, what we call now like an immersive experience. It was just normal life, wasn't it? So in the digital sphere, it's like what do we need to do? What are the steps we need to take in order to kind of to best approximate something that would happen in a physical environment? So then you've got you've got the funnel, you've got different kind of behavior change kind of metrics, and what do you apply at what point?
I'm thinking back of the bookshelves, right? Because Amazon, obviously, one of the first ones that got engagement really well done in the digital space, right? So I'm thinking back of a bookstore and how people determined where different books are located and so on and so forth, right? It was probably a very person-driven approach where somebody was just like, I know the stuff and I'll do it. I doubt, I might be wrong here, and this is, I'm dating myself. I doubt that people actually did the analysis and tested of if I do this, then more customers buy that. If I do this, then more customers buy that, right? I think there were some good fundamentals there, but I think that never happened. What happened then in the age of digital is that you can actually measure. And then because you can measure, you can optimize for it. And then you can speed things up and you can actually get things quicker to the point, as Andy said, where you actually become endlessly scrolling, where like engagement becomes your key metric. By the way, I mean, depending on what you say, and I like the question before marketing, that's where it then starts breaking in digital health, because engagement is not actually the key metric that you want, right? Games like things like Akili, different CBT programs, and so on and so forth, right? They suffer from the exact opposite. It's like if you go too well, then people just keep consuming and keep doing it, and that actually is detrimental to the outcomes again. So engagement there might not actually be then your fundamental success factor. But again, it is the one that a lot of people are driving towards because you can measure and because you can optimize for it, and it's easier to understand.
I can keep the analogy going. Actually, it made me think about something else, which is so yeah, I'm living here in Amsterdam, and there's a bookstore here where it's a mess. It's really a mess. There's no organization, there's no structure. And what it means is that actually when people arrive at the bookstore, they depend on the one person who works there, who knows where every book is placed, who can help you. But it means that there's a huge queue out the door because no one can kind of search around or find the things that they need themselves. They depend on this one person. So I think what's interesting about this metaphor is that I'm thinking about engagement is that in the last years, we've really been advocating for this empowered patient, someone who can manage themselves and take care of themselves and not be overly reliant on anyone else to be able to get resources and to get advice and etc. Or maybe get like an easier channel of access to a doctor or a resource. So I think what's interesting about this analogy is that by putting digital health tools in the hands of patients now, you're also empowering them to do a lot of that stuff on their own, which also creates a lot of different things you need to be careful of when you are engaging with patients, where in the past you did have this bottleneck where maybe you had doctors or clinical support who could be that person who curates exactly what you need, and they'll have their own set of biases. But now we're trying to standardize something, at the same time make it a bit personal and empowering people to be engaged in something that's useful for them, which oftentimes means that we're giving something to people that is not customized enough, or not personalized enough, because it's made for the masses, although maybe it's within a certain kind of disease or therapy focus. But yeah, imagine if actually, and I think it's an interesting lens through generative AI, is like if you do have that bookkeeper who knows where everything is, who can react to exactly what your questions are and can help to drive engagement in the certain digital health tool that you need. So yeah, it's actually came around full circle. This was a nice analogy.
So part of that kind of the immersive experience comes from the fact that you're happy to kind of browse, right? You want to be pleasantly surprised. You don't want to kind of walk in there and know that you're going to find precisely what you're looking for immediately. Because, you know, then almost what, I mean, right now, rather than 30 years ago, why would you even kind of bother going to a bookshop, right? You don't need, you know, serendipity. You don't need to be kind of pleasantly surprised. You can just go to Amazon based on the kind of, you know, your previous purchases. They will have a whole series of ones that the algorithm expects you to kind of, you know, to want to look for and enjoy. So yeah, that's the, how do you recreate that online without actually kind of, you know, potentially getting people to kind of engage for too long, and therefore, you know, being part of a problem rather than the solution. So so I think on the one hand, the prospect of AI and VR, what you've got is potentially a kind of, you know, a corollary. Is that the word I'm looking for here?
Corollary?
But an almost equivalent to the kind of the physical experience. But then you've got all the benefits of, you know, quantifiable and testable digital that you can kind of layer on top. So you can, you know, I mean, like imagine something in the future, you know, plugged into wearables and, you know, IoT and, you know, part of remote monitoring. There, you then kind of layer in, you know, the personalization, the predictive analytics, and you've got, you know, something that kind of knows you better and knows, you know, knows what you need before you need it. And you've got, you know, as a brand who'd be providing that, and, you know, probably not going to be one brand, it'll be a whole series of brands. You've got the ability to test and improve on a continual basis.
Let's face it, you're not going to walk into 100 stores. Well, okay, let's say 10 stores when you're looking for something, right? That just doesn't happen. Like you're looking for a specific item, you might have your 1, 2, 3 stores where you want to look for it, and after that, it's gone. When you look in the digital space, though, you actually do go to 10, 15, 20 websites, apps, whatever. So the entire journey needs to be a little bit more streamlined, needs to be a little bit more intuitive than in a classical store. Fundamentally, also because the big advantage of digital is that it has incremental cost for additional users, right? In a store, you get that clerk, you get someone you can ask, as we said before, right? That can sort of guide you along. You don't have the luxury in a digital space. So there is the sort of engagement piece that you need to be a lot more careful about in making sure that it is intuitive. People find what they need. They might actually prefer, right? Like if you think about very simple, the hooked method, right? That probably most people are familiar with from Nereal. If you think about that, right, then it is about the variable rewards. You actually want to create some of that browsing around. You actually don't want to be predictable. You want them to have a little bit of an experience that they can predict, and you want them to put in a bit of work to make that, right? It is basically reiterating what worked in the physical world. The problem is that you're competing with a lot of other instances, and the time frame is a lot shorter, right? Once I've invested going to the store, I'm already there. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. If I download an app or visit a website, I have not. I've not put in any time. There's no point in me staying too long. I'll just drop out if I don't understand, or if I feel like I'm not finding what I'm looking for easily. That's just a hard truth, and that's the part that I think engagement is fairly important to drive towards.
We can add maybe a different lens, which is, yeah, to me, I think the engagement is very much focused on the change in behavior connected to your healthy decision making, let's say, which is about the behavioral change, which I think the physical space hasn't always been well designed to be able to create those new habits to be formed, those new behaviors. So the example that always comes to mind is like flossing your teeth, because I think what all of us have probably experienced is that we've gone to a dentist at some point and been asked, how often do you floss your teeth? And the answer is usually not as often as you should be, right? And that same thing basically occurs every 6 months, however often it is that you're going to a dentist. But I think that the difference is that when we're talking about digital health and we're talking about engagement in digital health, it's like, what are those touch points that help to drive that change in behavior, like flossing as just a kind of relatable example. And I don't think that, again, the physical world has been so well designed to tailor that. But it also brings in this question of informing people's behavior sometimes can be seen as a form of manipulation, in the way that you were talking about big tech companies who can really control our behaviors in a way that's maybe unhealthy. I think this is maybe an ethical question that often comes up, because when we're trying to drive changes in behavior and we figure out a way to do it, maybe in a scientific way, it also creates a lot of power for people and organizations who are able to do that. Even when it's something as small as flossing, it still is really driving people to make that change. So that's maybe a different lens connected to the way that I would define engagement too.